Hello students, welcome back. Class 11 IP student. Today I am discussing our MySQL topic, MySQL functions, numeric functions and aggregate function, date and time function we will discuss. We can see mode function, power function, round functions, sign functions, okay, sqrt function, truncate function we will discuss one by one, okay. So first we start all programs MySQL server 5.5 and here I am using MySQL command line, okay. So here I am giving the password, here I am using password root. This is a password of MySQL server. Here I am showing all the database. So here I am using show databases. So you can see all the database list you can see in this. So here we can use school database. So first we open school database, use school. So you can see this is a school database. In school database we can show all the tables. So you can see in school database only one table, student. I want to see the structure. So here I am using describe student. So it will display SID column, name column, city column, date of birth column, fees. And data type you can say SID integer, name where character, city where character, date of birth date and fees decimal, okay. And here you can see constraint, primary key is student ID and other we must input data, okay. So you can see, but in fees column there is no constraint, we can also left blank because here null value will allow, okay. But name, city, date of birth must input, okay. Now I want to display all the records. So here we select start from, here I am student. So you can see the detail of our student table. So select start from student. But today our main concern is first we introduce numeric function. So first we can use mode function. So here I am using select, here I am using mode, here I am using 5,2. So it will give 1 means 5 divided 2. So it will give remainder. It will give remainder. So what is the remainder? You can see 1. Okay, here I am using select. Okay, here I am using mode. Here I am using suppose 7,3 means we can say 7 divided by 3. So what is the remainder? What is the remainder of this? So it will display because here select spelling we can change, okay. So you can see, so you can just 7 divided by 3, so you can see the remainder 1, okay. So simply we can use remainder, suppose 3 upon 7. So what is the remainder? So you can see, so remainder of this value you can see 3, okay. So 3 upon 7, so automatically remainder is 3. So with the help of mode we can see the remainder. Here I am using select, here I am using fees from student table, okay. So you can see all the fees, but on the fees here we can use mode function. So we can use fees, but here I am using divide 2, okay. So all the fees value 1 by 1 divide by 2 and from student table, okay. So you can see in output, so you can see all you will after dividing it will give remainder 0 means completely divisible, okay. Now here I am using select, suppose I want to choose fees, here I am using mode, okay. Here I am using fees divide by 4 from student table, okay. Now you can see again all the fees completely divisible, so there is no remainder. Okay, suppose here I am divided by suppose 3. So now this time you can see here 100 will come not divide, so it will give 1. 200 will give 200 upon 3, so it will give 2. 300 upon 3, okay, there is no remainder. Okay, after null there is no null. Null in arithmetic give null. 500 upon 3. So what is the remainder? 2. Again 500 upon 3. What is remainder? 2. 100 upon 3. So what is the remainder? 1. So you can see we can perform mode operation in our normal operation and we can use in our data table column. Now next function is our power function. So we can use select. First we simply use power. Here I am using 2, 3. So you can see, so 2 2 in exponent 3. So we can say 2 multiply 2 multiply 2. So 2 multiply 2, 4, 4 multiply 2. So it will give 8. Okay, here I am using select power 3 comma 2. So what is output? 3 square we can say. So 3 multiply 3. So it will give 9. Okay, here I am using select power. Here I am using 4 comma 3. So you can see 4 multiply 4 multiply 4. So 4 multiply 4, 16. 16 multiply 4, 64. So it will give 64. So with the help of power, we can calculate power of anything. So what is the output of this code? So we can say 25 means 5 square we can say. Here I am using select power. Here I am using 5 comma 3. So what is the output? You can see 125 because 5 multiply 5 3 times. Here I am using select. Here I am using power 3 comma 5. So what is the output? So you can see 243 means 3 multiply 3 multiply 3 multiply 3 multiply 3. So 5 times we can multiply. We can also use our point values. We can suppose here I am using 2.5 comma 2. Okay, so we can also use our decimal point data also. Now suppose we want to increase fees. Okay, so in fees column we can use power function. Here I am using fees column. Here I am using square of our fees from student table. So you can see very interesting thing. So this is your fees and I want to square the fees. So you can see 100 square, you can see 200 square, you can see 300 square. Okay. Now here again I am using the same. Here I am using the cube of the fees. So select fees. Okay, it will display as it is. Now here I am using power function on the fees column, but here I am using cube. So you can see 100 multiply 100 multiply 100. So now you can see that this is our fees value, and each value you can say 3 times multiply. So we can use the power function. Okay, we can also use in decimal square also. Here I am using 3.2. So you can see very interesting result 100. So it will multiply by 3.2 in exponent form. Okay. So but this is output is very complex. Okay, but we can perform. Okay, we can use decimal point square cube as you wish. Okay. Now this is power function. Now next function is our round off function. This is our round function. Okay. So for round function here I am using our notes example. You can see this example here I am taking. Okay, so first you can see select round. Here I am using round. Okay, or here I am using the what is the round? Here I am using 52.356. So what is the round? So it will give 52. Okay, because after decimal point the value is below 0.5. After decimal point, again I am showing this value is below 0.5. So it will not round. It will as it is. You can see 52. Okay. So same thing we can write in this style. Okay. So here I am using select round, but here I am using comma 0. So again, so this round and this round will give the same result because here means after decimal point I want to round 0. So it will give again 52. Suppose here I am using this command. Okay, select round. Here I am using 52.5635 comma 0. Okay, so we can say because after decimal point this value is above 0.5. So it will round off. So it will give 53. Okay, so it will give 53 because 0.5635. So this value is above 0.5. So it will round 53. But here I want to use comma 1. So after decimal point I want to round off 1 digit. Here I am using comma 1 means after decimal point I want to round off 1 digit. So here I am using same command, but here I am using 1. What is means? So after decimal point I want to see in round of 1 digit. So you can see here, you can see 52.6. Okay, so this value you can see because this is above 0.5, so you can see round off 0.6. Okay, so same value I want to round off but in 2 digit. I want to see the round off but after decimal point 2 digit. So you can see. So you can see after decimal point it will display 52.5635. 5 6. Okay students, so we can use a round off function. We can round our any value number of digits. Suppose same value we can use, but I want to round off in 3 digit. So in 3 digit you can see 5 6 4. Okay, but important thing is we can round number of decimal places, or we can directly use 0. So completely it will without decimal point round off. You can see in this output. Okay, so same function we can use truncate. We can use truncate, but truncate never round off. Okay, truncate never round off this thing. Okay, so here I am using 5 6 comma, here I am using same thing. Okay, so here I am using select truncate, TRUN. Okay, spelling mistake, truncate. Okay, select TRUNCAT, truncate 552.356. Okay, so truncate function require comma and how many decimal place you want. So here I am using 0 and enter. So it will give 52. It means after decimal point I don't want anything. So truncate will discard all the value after decimal point. So it will give 52. So same example here I am using 1. Okay, so it will select after decimal point only one value it will select. You can see 52.3. So truncate function never round off. Truncate function never round off. Just it will select how many decimal points values you want after decimal point. So simply we can use, suppose here I am using 2. So truncate will give 52.35. Simply it will select after decimal point 2 digits. So as it is, it will select and display. Okay, here I am using 3. So after decimal point I want 3 digits. So it will simply select 52.356. Suppose here I am using 4 5 6 7. Okay, so after decimal point I want to 5 digit. Okay, so you can see 52.35645. Okay, so you can see. So truncate function simply select how many digits you want after decimal point. So it will simply select 5 digits, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, simply it will select. Suppose you want to see only 2 digits, so it will select only 52.35. Also you can say understand truncate only select after decimal point how many digits you want, but round function always round off. Okay, if after decimal point value is above 0.5, so it will round off according to mentioned values, and below 0.5, so it will not round off. Okay, so you can see the difference. So truncate never round off. It will select simply how many digits you want after decimal point, but round always round off according to decimal point. If decimal point above 0.5, so it will round off, otherwise not. So you can see the difference between truncate, and so you can see truncate, it return the desired decimal value but never rounding value. Okay, but round, you can see value comma digits, so it round the value if decimal value above 0.5. Okay, above 0.5 you can see, so it become 1, otherwise no change. So simply you can see. Now here we have another function, sign function. Okay, so we can use sign function. So here I am using select. Okay, here I am using sign. Suppose here I am using 15. So simply we can say 15 is a positive value. So sign function give 1. Here I am using suppose minus 15. So it will give minus 1. So any value in bracket, if positive, negative, sign function give only 3 result. 0, 1 and minus 1. If value is positive, sign function will give 1. If value is negative, sign function always give minus 1. Here I am using select sign 0. So what is the output? Simply it will give 0. So sign function only give 3 things. Sign, it return sign, 0 simply 0. Any positive value it will give always 1. Any negative value it will give minus 1. So suppose select, here I am using sign, here I am using minus 94.36. So simply we can say it will select minus 1, means that value is negative value. Here I am using select sine 94.85, so it will give in output only 1, because in overall this is a positive value. Okay, so we can use sine function to see the respective value, positive, negative or 0. Okay students, now you can see truncate function we already discussed. Now here one new function is SQRT function, square root function. Simply we can use select SQRT. Simply we can use 144. So we can know 12. Square root of 144, 12. Here I am using select SQRT. Here I am using 169. So it will select 169 square root. It will select 13. Here I am using select SQRT. Here I am using 2 to 5. So what is the square root? It will give 15. Here I am using select SQRT. Suppose 6 to 5. So we know very well it will give 25. But SQRT function we can apply on our fees column. So here I am using fees. Okay. First we see our actual fees. Then we can use SQRT function. Here I am using fees column from student table. So very interesting thing. So this is our original fees column, but in front you can see the square root of 100, 10, square root of 200, you can see 14.14, 300, 17.32. Okay, null, there is no effect. 500, 22.36. Okay, again 500. Okay, so we can also use fees value one by one, where you can see SQRT according to this. Okay students, so this is very interesting program. Okay, so you can see. So today I am discussing mode function. Okay, give remainder, power function, round off we already discussed, sine function we display plus, minus 1 or 0, SQRT, truncate we already discussed. Okay students, so these are our numerical functions. Here we simply use sum, average, count, max and minimum. Okay, this is very simple thing we can use. Suppose I want to see select, first I want to display fees from student table. Okay, so you can see all the fees you can see, but I want to see the sum. Here I am using sum of fees column. So here I am using sum, here I am using student. So it will display simply sum. Okay, without including null. Okay, it will not include null because null never perform any kind of error. Here I am using max. Okay, so what is the maximum value of fees? Here I am using student. So maximum value you can see in fees column 500. Here I am using minimum, select mean. Here I am using fees from. Here I am using student. So what is the minimum value? So we know very well minimum value in this column 100. So you can see in minimum you can see 100. Suppose I want to simply count all fees. So simply we can say all the data you can see. So it will give 6. Okay, because you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, null never count. Okay, because this is empty value. Okay, so simply count will count 6. Now here we have another last function, average. So we can use average of fees from student. So you can see 283.33. This is our average value. Okay, average means simply we can say 100 plus 200 plus 300 plus 500 plus 500 plus 100 upon 6. So it will give average value. So it will give 283. But all thing you can see in one place. Okay, select. Suppose here I am using sum. Here I am using fees. Okay, here I am using max. Here I am using mean. Here I am using count. Here I am using average. Okay, here I am using enter from student table. So all the aggregate function you will display at a time, sum, max, mean, count and according to. So you can see sum, okay, maximum 500, minimum 100, count 6, average you can see 283.3333. So this is our average value. Okay, so now you can see. Okay, select. Suppose I want to see the sum. Okay, on the condition basis. Okay, on the condition basis from student. Here I am using where fees is greater than 200. Okay, so what is the output? It will give 1300. Okay, because all the fees above 200. Okay, so first we display select fees from, here I am using student, here I am using where fees 200. So you can see, above 200 you can see 300, 500, 500. Okay, so this is our output. But before, you can see here I want to not display the fees, I want to display the sum. So here I am using sum fees. So it will select this condition based selected row. So you can see 3 plus, so you can see 1300. Okay, so here I am performing aggregate function on the condition basis. Here we select only greater than 200 fees data. Okay, so you know the difference between, it will give the sum, it will display all the fees which is greater than 200, but it will not display 200. It will after selecting above 200, but it will give the sum. So same thing you can perform in another situation. So now suppose here I am using select fees, here I am using from, here I am using student, where, here I am using roll number, here using SID greater than 103. So you can see now 103, you can see 500, 500 and 100. Okay, so here I am displaying select star from, here I am using student. So you can see here greater than 103. So you can understand 104, 105, 106, 107. But here I want to see only the fees. So you can see the fees is null. Okay, 500. Okay, 500. Okay, and 100 you can okay. So you can see we can select our data fees, but I want to sum of the fees. So simply we can use select, here using sum fees from, here I am using student, where SID greater than 104, SID greater than, here I am using suppose 103. Okay, now this time it will give 1100 because 500, 500, 100. So it will give 1100. So we can first we select our selectively row using the where, then which column you want and which thing you want to perform. Here I am using sum function. So it will give. So we can use sum, max, mean, everything you can perform according to our choice. So we can easily see our output. So dear student, today I am discuss about numerical function and aggregate function, mode function, power function, round function, sine function, squarity function, truncate function. Okay, and aggregate function you can see sum, average, count, max and minimum. Next time we will discuss about date and time function. Okay students, thank you so much.